Okay, well, let's talk the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is really going to serve as an introduction to developmental pediatrics for us. Um, and we'll just kind of see where this takes us. This is Dr. Kevin Windisch from Sparks Pediatric and Adolescent Medicine. If you have questions about this, we can be reached at 775-359-7111. We're willing to see your child same day for consultation. What we cannot really do is help your child over the internet or over the telephone. If you're a professional student wishing to schedule a rotation with us, we're happy to arrange that as well. So let's take a look at what we've got here. And this is my contact information, which is all over both our office Facebook here, as well as our office website and our office phone number and address again. So let's look at the background of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. In 1975, Gerald Ford, President of the United States, signed Public Law 94-142. And before we go any further, please realize that this discussion is really specific to the United States. Some of this can be generalized to other countries, but if you're from another country, you may find a lot of this is not applicable. These are our laws and the way things are handled in this country. That's where I practice pediatrics, and that's what I understand. So the first law was called Education for All Handicapped Children Act of 1975. And it provided access to free and appropriate education for children 6 to 18 years of age. In 1980, this was amended to provide access for children 3 to 21. And in 1986, Public Law 99-457 was enacted, reauthorizing EHA 1975 and extending eligibility down to birth. So now the law covered kids from birth to ages 21. In 1990, Congress passed Public Law 101-476, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and that's the law that's in place now. That's what we're really discussing. So what are the caveats to the law? Well, the first caveat is that it goes from birth to 21 years of age. It must be free and appropriate. It needs to be individualized towards the patient. It needs to be in the least restrictive environment possible. And there need to be some procedural safeguards for the patient to make sure that they are getting their appropriate services and that they're not having their environment restricted needlessly. So free and appropriate, what does that mean? Whoops. Let's go back, sorry. So what does that mean? Well, it means it needs to be free. Now that sounds very simple, but I've seen over and over and over again patients told stories when they go to obtain services. You know, oh, we'd love to get your child early intervention, but we need your insurance card. I don't have insurance. Oh, well, that'll be very expensive. We're happy to see you. My child needs an aide because he has autism, and that aide needs to help him at school. Well, we're not budgeted for that. Feel free to hire whoever you like, and then, you know, we'll get them credentialed with the school on your dime. Well, that's not free. Well, if you can't afford that, well, then we can just forego those services. Well, that would not be appropriate. Individualized. It needs to be tailored towards the individual patient. They need to be thoroughly assessed and their individual needs met. Um, and you can see my little quote here. This photo takes place at the site of what used to be a bar in Portland, which is the site of the term Shanghai. Patrons sitting at the bar would find themselves dumped into a cellar that served as a prison when they became intoxicated, and then find themselves impressed into service upon a steamer headed towards Shanghai, China. Hence the term Shanghai, as in the school district Shanghaied that child. Needs to be in the least restrictive environment possible. And who cares? Well, of course, we all care. Why do we care? Well, again, I've seen this used as an attempt to scare parents off from receiving services. Sure, you'd like that aid for your child? We'll just put you in the homebound program. That, of course, would be a very restrictive environment, not in the child's best interest, and the parents, being well aware of that, would decline and then remove the child from public schools. I've seen that more than once. Well, we'll leave it at that. Procedural safeguards in the appeals process. Well, again, why do we care? Well, there needs to be an appeals process because otherwise patients are going to find their rights being trod upon. It's important to realize that the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act really is spelling out your civil rights, and violations thereof are a violation of your civil rights, just as if you went to vote and we suspended those rights and wouldn't allow you vote in a presidential election. As a consequence, you need to have a right to come in front of a magistrate and appeal the removal of those rights. Similarly, if we took you and we locked you up and said, you know, you don't get to wander around the United States at will, again, you have a right to appeal that. And you do here if we suspend these civil rights as well. There is a parallel law that provides us with something called 504 plans. This was originally part of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and that was paired with the Americans with Disabilities Act via the ADA amendments in 1990. It prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities and ensures that a child with disability has equal access to education. The child may receive accommodations and modifications. Section 504 does not require that the school provide the patient with an individualized education plan, but that they do meet the child's unique needs and educational, or unique needs in order to provide the child with necessary educational benefit. So what are the implications of this? Whoops, sorry. So the implications of 504 plans are that we can obtain in-classroom modifications as necessary for children with certain disabilities. These are children who may otherwise be academically sound, but without these modifications may not succeed academically. Perfect example, a simple example would be a patient with hearing impairment. A child who can't hear can't learn. Maybe we need to move their seat to the front of the classroom. Maybe we need to obtain an amplification system for the teacher. A patient with simple vision impairment, not blind, but requiring extra light because he has retinitis pigmentosa, so a desk lamp is provided for him. A patient who has no arms, hence can't hold a pencil, so takes a little bit longer on a essay test. So instead of having an hour, might need 2 hours, 4 hours. Shorter essays. After all, writing with your mouth is a little bit slower. Or be allowed to type instead if that's faster. So you can see how there's some needs. These patients may have um, IQs, way above normal and academically may be absolutely brilliant. You can imagine somebody like Stephen Hawking, the famous physicist. Now, Stephen Hawking didn't have symptoms when he was in school, but what about a young Stephen Hawking? Could there not be one in our school system today? Of course there is, somewhere out there. And without any educational modifications, um, the young Stephen Hawking would absolutely fail in school. The man can't walk. Does that mean he should be allowed to fail out of school? Of course not. And would our society be better off allowing that to happen and saving that money? To lose one of the most famous physicist minds in the history of the world, I would say our world is better off with him in it and with his with the next Stephen Hawking in it as well, and hence the necessity for this law. We want to kind of turn our attention to autism, which is a huge, aspect of the DSM, or I'm sorry, of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It's a large part of what is covered under the IDEA. And specifically, we're going to look at the DSM-4 TR criteria because as of the time I was writing these slides, the 5 hadn't even been out yet, and it's still not still doesn't have complete penetrance into the academic realm, and a lot of people question some of the new DSM criteria. So we're going to look at the 4 TR criteria. 6 or more symptoms from sections 1, 2, and 3 with at least 2 from section 1 and 1 from section 2 and section 3. So what are the various sections? Well, section 1, qualitative impairment in social interaction. This includes impairment in the use of nonverbal behaviors such as eye gaze and facial expressions, failure to develop peer relationships, lack of spontaneous seeking to share enjoyment, lack of social or emotional reciprocity. 2 qualitative impairments in communication, delay in development of spoken language, impairment in the ability to initiate or sustain a conversation, stereotyped and repetitive, and that's supposed to be repetitive in spite of the misspelling, use of language. Ooh, the spelling there is awful, isn't that? Lack of I made the slide. I'm responsible for it. What can I say? I should have spell checked it again. Lack of varied, spontaneous, make-believe play. Restrictive, repetitive, and stereotyped behaviors, such as arm flapping, rocking, head banging. Encompassing preoccupation with one or more stereotyped restrictive pattern of interest that is abnormal in both its intensity and or focus. Apparently inflexible adherence to, not some strange foreign language, to specific non-functional routines. Stereotyped repetitive motor mannerisms, hand flapping. Preoccupation with parts of objects. Delays in at least one of the following areas prior to age 3. Social interaction, language, or symbolic and imaginative play. The disturbance is not better accounted for by Rett's disorder or childhood disintegrative disorder. Looking quickly at ADHD because that gets a lot of kids 504 plans. Either, and again we're looking at the DSM-4 criteria, either 1 or 2. 6 or more of the following: careless mistakes, difficulty sustaining attention in tasks, doesn't listen when spoken to, does not follow through on instructions, disorganized, avoid tasks that require sustained mental effort, loses things necessary for activities, distractible, often forgetful. 6 or more of the following: Often fidgets, leaves the seat in the classroom, runs about excessively, often has difficulty playing quietly, is often on the go, talks excessively, blurts out answers to questions, often has difficulty waiting turn, often interrupts others. Some of the symptoms need to be present before age 7. That is a big, big section that's deleted from the DSM-5. Some impairment from symptoms in 2 or more settings. Clinically significant impairment in social, academic, or occupational functioning. Symptoms do not occur exclusively during the course of pervasive developmental disorder, schizophrenia, or other psychotic disorder, and are not better accounted for by another mental disorder. So some references regarding all of this. Well, there's the DSM-4, now 5. Nice article for you on special education from Peds Clinics of North America, volume 39, number 3 and 92, and rightslaw.com, which has tons of scholarly papers on the subject. Rights Law is a disabilities advocate. And then this video. Going back, we're going to go back to rights of appeal, because there was a section that I didn't get into that I do want to talk about, and that's procedural safeguards. One of the procedural safeguards in place that's interesting is that the federal government requires that the states provide for patients at the cost of the state legal advocates, i.e. lawyers, whose sole job is to litigate this process at the cost of the state. So these lawyers don't generally cost any out-of-pocket for the patients. Now, how good are the lawyers, I've been asked? Well, it's like anything. How good are the doctors at Children's Hospital of Oakland? Really good, unless you happen to have a complication and something bad happened to you, as is in the news right now as I'm speaking. Yet Children's Oakland is a superlative facility for children. How good is a given lawyer or is a given law firm? Well, very good, unless they happen to be the one who loses your case. In general, disabilities advocates are very dedicated to the cause. They could make a lot more money in private practice or in business practice, but instead chose to go into educational law. Usually they're pretty motivated and pretty dedicated to the cause, but of course they could, like anybody else, be overwhelmed or overworked or burnt out or just not very good. In general, however, they're very good. And this is all they do for a living. They're paid for by the state. There's no out-of-pocket for you or for the patient to utilize their services. And they're a very good advocacy service. Quite honestly, it's as long as what you're asking for is standard, accepted care and education for your child, it's rare that they lose. I have seen patients who've asked for due process hearings where they're told things by the school, such as, well, do you have a lawyer? You know a due process hearing is a legal event, and as such, you're going to need a lawyer. Oh, you don't have a lawyer? Well, we'll get you a list of lawyers that give our patients or our students discounts and, don't charge quite the usual $300 an hour that a lawyer costs. Well, in my community, $300 an hour is typical legal fees. So they didn't lie to the patient or the student, but they didn't exactly tell them the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, which is, yeah, that discount is free. It's 100% because we, the state, pay for the advocate. They already receive a salary. It's a bit of an issue. So it's important as medical providers we're prepared to help our patients when they hear some of these mistruths and to redirect them and to re-educate them as to the reality so that they can advocate for their children and receive the services that they're not only entitled to, but are necessary to help with a functioning, healthy child. Um, so I hope this has been helpful to you as a professional student or as a parent of a patient who may have some special needs and having some difficulty obtaining academic services. Again, if we can be of assistance here, if we can see your child, feel free to call us. We'd be happy to see your child. 775-359-7111. Have a good afternoon.